The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with cold light from the ceiling panels, and the soft hum of translators that turned dozens of alien voices into one understandable language. The air was heavy, and everyone knew that something important was about to happen. At the center of the hall stood a man, chained and silent, wearing a torn blue uniform that once carried the flag of Earth. His name was Daniel Brooks. He had been the human ambassador for 3 years, a man who had once believed in peace between worlds. He had spent those years defending the rights of his people, trying to build bridges where others wanted walls. But now, after months of political fights and false accusations, he was accused of treason against the Council. His crime was simple but unforgivable in the eyes of the aliens who ruled the stars. He had refused to let Earth give away its resources without fair trade. And when the Council had demanded obedience, he had stood his ground. As the guards pushed him forward, Daniel kept his eyes on the large ring of alien leaders who sat on raised platforms. Each species had its own way of showing power. Some wore metal armor that reflected the light. Others sat in silence with skin that shimmered like glass. The Grand Speaker of the Council, a tall being covered in silver scales, raised its thin hands. "Daniel Brooks of Earth," it said in a calm but cold tone, "you stand accused of violating the Accords of Unity, of refusing Council command, and of inciting defiance among your kind. The punishment is death. Do you have any final words?" Daniel looked around the hall, his eyes finding one familiar face near the lower seats. Linda Harris, his aide, stood there among the guards, her eyes wet but unbroken. She shook her head slightly, a silent plea for him not to make things worse. Daniel smiled sadly. He turned his head back toward the Council. "You claim unity," he said quietly, "but what you really mean is control. You say peace, but you only want silence. Humanity will remember this day." His voice echoed across the chamber. Some of the alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others hissed or made clicking sounds that passed for laughter in their species. The Grand Speaker leaned forward. "Then humanity will remember that defiance brings destruction." Before anyone could react, the guards pulled Daniel backward. The floor beneath him began to glow, forming a circular light that grew brighter and brighter. It was not a normal execution. It was a display. The Council wanted the whole galaxy to see what happened when someone stood against them. The chamber's screens came alive, broadcasting the event to hundreds of star systems. Daniel closed his eyes. The light grew stronger until his body was gone, leaving only silence and the faint smell of ozone in the air. Linda stood frozen, her hands shaking. She had known this could happen, but the reality of it hit her harder than she had ever imagined. She lowered her head, pretending to obey the guard's orders, but her wrist communicator was already transmitting a signal. Hidden beneath the folds of her uniform was a small transmitter, something Daniel had given her before the trial. His final message to Earth. Far away across the dark of space, in the deep command center beneath the city of New Washington, the encrypted message reached Earth's central network. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. When the message came through, an officer called out to the woman standing at the main console. President Laura King turned toward the screen, her eyes scanning the short message that appeared. It was simple. "The Council has chosen war. Execute Protocol 7. She didn't speak for a long moment. The officers in the room watched her, waiting for her decision. Then, in a calm voice that carried no emotion, she said, "Initiate Destruction Protocol." Across the Earth's orbital stations, alarms began to sound. On Mars, Luna, and Titan, entire fleets that had been in standby mode for decades came alive. Massive ships rose from underground hangars, their engines lighting the red soil beneath them. On the dark side of the moon, silos opened one by one, revealing the long-hidden weapons humanity had sworn never to use unless the Council forced their hand. The communication lines between Earth's colonies went silent as if the human race had vanished from the galactic network. Back in the Council Hall, chaos spread quickly. News of Daniel's execution reached the outer colonies faster than anyone expected. Alien ambassadors began to argue among themselves, some saying the Council had gone too far, others claiming that humans had always been dangerous. But the Grand Speaker remained calm. "They are only one species," it said, "and they will learn to obey." Yet deep within its mind, even it felt a trace of unease. The humans had always been unpredictable. They had advanced faster than any species the Council had ever seen. They were strong, inventive, and strangely united when threatened. Linda Harris was taken into custody soon after the execution, accused of spying for Earth. But she said nothing. Inside her cell, she stared at the walls, knowing that the message had already reached home. She imagined the blue light of the Earth's oceans and the tall towers of New Washington. She imagined the faces of the people who would now prepare for the unthinkable. Humanity had not sought war, but it had never been one to surrender. In the deep void beyond the solar system, human scout ships went dark. Trade routes once filled with merchant vessels became empty. The galactic stations that had once relied on human supplies began to feel the absence. The Council tried to send probes and patrols, but many never returned. Something was moving in the dark, something vast and silent. President King stood before the Earth Defense Command, looking at the giant screen that showed the growing fleet formations near Jupiter's orbit. "For centuries we believed that peace could be built on trust," she said. "We offered our hand to the stars. They answered with chains. They killed our ambassador, our voice of peace. They have mistaken kindness for weakness. That mistake will not be repeated." The generals in the room saluted in silence. No one cheered. There was no joy in what was coming. Humanity had always wanted to explore, to understand, to grow, but the Council's cruelty had left no other path. The fleet known as the Terran Guard began to move out of Jupiter's shadow, thousands of ships aligning into perfect formation. Their engines burned bright against the black, each one a silent promise that humanity would not kneel again. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, fear began to spread. The alien species that had once mocked humans for their small worlds now looked at the empty trade lanes and the darkened communication grids and wondered what was happening. The humans had gone silent, and that silence felt more dangerous than any threat. The Grand Speaker ordered all fleets to high alert, but no one knew where to strike. Humanity had vanished into the shadows of its home system. And the unknown was the one thing even the oldest empires feared. Linda Harris was transferred to a higher security prison on Terralon, the Council's capital world. During the journey, she looked out the window of the transport ship. She could see the stars, bright and endless, and she thought of Daniel. She remembered his last words, the quiet strength in his voice, the way he had faced death without fear. She whispered to herself, "They will remember this day." Back on Earth, the command screens flickered as coded signals spread through the human network. Every soldier, every pilot, every technician knew what those codes meant. It was not just about revenge. It was about justice. Humanity had been pushed, insulted, and treated as lesser beings. Now, it would show the galaxy what it meant to face a united Earth. In the quiet before the storm, the stars over Earth seemed to burn a little brighter. The people looked up not with fear but with determination. They had lost one of their own, and that loss would not be in vain. The Council had started something it could not control, and the humans, once patient and peaceful, were now preparing to reveal the strength they had always kept hidden. When the first order was sent, the human fleet began to move beyond the outer planets, their engines lighting the darkness. The galaxy did not yet know, but the balance of power was about to change forever. The galaxy became quiet after the human ambassador was executed and Earth had gone silent. No messages, no trade, no signal. Nothing came from their worlds, and that silence began to feel heavy and strange across the stars. The Council tried to convince itself that it was only fear that had made the humans hide. But deep down, they all knew something was coming. The humans were not a race that forgot so easily. The Grand Speaker of the Council stood inside the tall command chamber on Terralon and listened to the reports from different sectors. The human colonies were empty, their trade routes abandoned and their stations locked. No one could reach them, not even the neutral species who once dealt with them. The speaker turned its bright eyes to the other delegates and said, "It is only a temporary reaction. They are frightened. They will return to the table soon," but the others did not answer because they had all heard the rumors. The humans were not frightened. They were preparing. Far away, near Jupiter's orbit, the great Terran fleet had gathered. The dark shapes of thousands of ships floated in silent formation around the red storms of the giant planet. Admiral Jason Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the endless rows of ships displayed on the screen. His crew worked quietly. They all knew why they were there. The death of Daniel Brooks had united them in a way no speech ever could. The fleet was made of every human world, from Mars to Europa, each sending their best pilots and soldiers. Some were veterans of old wars. Others were young and had never seen battle. But they all shared the same look in their eyes. Determination. Jason walked to the main window and watched the distant light of the sun. He thought of the ambassador's last words. He remembered seeing him once on Earth years ago. A man who believed that peace could last forever. Now his death had become the spark that woke something deep inside humanity. Jason turned to his officers and spoke in a calm voice. Send word to Luna. Command, tell them the fleet stands ready for orders. The officer nodded and sent the signal across secure channels that were invisible to alien scanners. On Earth, President Laura King sat in the dark command room surrounded by silent generals. The large map of the galaxy shone before them. Tiny dots of light marked every human world and every alien system, connected by thin lines of trade and diplomacy lines that no longer existed. The president looked tired, but her voice was steady. We tried to reason, she said. We tried to speak to them in peace, and they murdered our voice. Now we will answer. Not with words, but with silence. She looked at the screen showing the face of Admiral Carter. He saluted and said, the fleet is ready, ma'am, awaiting your final command. She nodded. Good, then we begin Phase 1. At the same time, deep in the alien capital, Terralon, the Council received the first reports of missing patrols. Several ships had gone to inspect the borders near human space, and none had returned. One delegate from the Carif species said, perhaps they are simply malfunctioning. The humans use strange technology, another delegate hissed. Or perhaps they are hunting already. The Grand Speaker silenced them all. Enough humans are reckless. They cannot win against the united power of the Council. We will send the fleet of 10 worlds. They will remind Earth of its place. And the order was given, but the humans were already moving faster than anyone expected. Silent ships with no identification signals slipped through dark space. They carried drones that attached themselves to alien satellites and stations, shutting them down without a sound on trade worlds. The lights went out. Factories stopped and power grids failed in a single night. Billions of aliens woke to darkness, not knowing why. The Council thought it was sabotage by criminals, but soon they saw the pattern. Every affected world had one thing in common. It had taken part in the vote to execute Daniel Brooks. Admiral Carter watched the reports come in with cold satisfaction. He knew it was only the beginning. Every action had been planned for years. Humans had never trusted the Council completely. They had learned from history from the old wars on Earth and had always prepared for the day when peace would break. The Admiral turned to his officers and said they thought we were naive. They thought we were weak. Show them how wrong they are. His words spread through the fleet, and every soldier who heard them felt their heart tighten with pride. In the outer colonies, alien patrol fleets tried to block human movements, but they found nothing. The humans were ghosts, invisible and patient near the edge of the Orion. The first confrontation finally happened. An alien battleship from the Varnak Empire intercepted a small human ship. They demanded identification, but there was no answer. Then the human ship transmitted a short message. This is Earth. We are not your subjects. The next second, the alien ship's systems failed, and it drifted powerless through space while a hidden human cruiser cloaked in silence passed by without a shot. The message was sent across the galaxy on Terralon. Panic began to grow. Merchants refused to travel near human sectors. Soldiers whispered about invisible fleets, and entire trade guilds demanded the Council end the conflict. But the Grand Speaker refused to show fear. They are few. It said, we are many, yet even as it spoke, reports came in of another destroyed convoy, and of colonies losing contact one by one back on Earth. President King met with her advisors in the underground command center. The lights of the room flickered as the old war satellites came online after decades of silence. She looked at the map showing red zones spreading across the Council territories. She said, we are not conquerors, we are protectors, but they must understand we will never bow again. An advisor asked, ma'am, what about diplomacy? She looked at him for a long moment and said, diplomacy died with Daniel Brooks. Meanwhile, Linda Harris, still a prisoner on Terralon, was kept in a small cell without light. She could hear the footsteps of guards outside. She spent her days remembering the sound of Daniel's voice, the calm way he had accepted death. She had been trained to stay strong and silent, but sometimes she whispered to herself, just to remember the sound of human speech. The guards mocked her, calling her weak, but she smiled because she knew the truth. Earth was coming, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it. Admiral Carter's fleet began its final preparations. Every ship was equipped with stealth drives and new weapons powered by human-designed reactors, far stronger than anything the Council fleets possessed in the quiet dark of space. He gave the final speech to his crew, through the internal comm network. He spoke slowly, his voice low and steady. They killed our ambassador, because he would not. Kneel, they thought they could scare us into silence, but they forgot who we are. We are humans, we come from a world that has survived everything. We will not stop until they remember our name. As he finished speaking, the fleet began to move engines, igniting in perfect synchronization. They left Jupiter's orbit, heading toward the border of Council space, the largest armada ever assembled by humans. The stars reflected off the hulls of thousands of ships like cold fire. And in that endless dark there was no sound, only purpose. Across the galaxy, sensors picked up the faint movements of large fleets approaching unknown sectors. The Council panicked, sending ships to defend key worlds. But it was too late, the humans were already within. Striking distance, President King watched from Earth as the data came in, every signal, every code, every ship moving according to plan. She whispered to herself, "Daniel, this is for you." And so the silence before the storm spread wider across the stars. The humans had vanished for a time, but now they were returning, and the galaxy was about to remember what humanity could become when pushed too far, and when the quiet ends, it will not end softly. The night sky over the Council world of Velnora Prime glowed with thousands of stars, and the tall towers of the capital city shimmered like glass under the twin moons. The planet was calm and full of pride, for it was the place where the Council had carried out its judgment against the human ambassador. It was the symbol of power and order. No one on that world believed that humans could ever touch them. The guards laughed when they saw messages about missing fleets. They thought it was another rumor spread by frightened traders. But that night everything changed without warning. The sky split open as lines of fire cut through the atmosphere. It was not ships at first, but flashes of light moving faster than any defense could react. And then the ground began to shake. People ran to the windows and saw bright streaks falling from the stars. The first impact turned the horizon white, and the air filled with fire. High above the burning world, human ships emerged from the dark, their hulls black against the light of the explosions. Admiral Jason Carter watched from his command deck as the bombardment began. Thousands of tungsten rods launched from orbit struck the surface at speeds that shattered mountains in seconds. Entire cities vanished, leaving only dust. The admiral stood still, his face calm but his eyes hard. He said to his officers, "Mark the location of the Council Palace. Confirm destruction." The officer answered, "Yes, sir. The target has been neutralized." Jason nodded and turned to the screen, showing the human flag flickering in quiet pride. He knew this attack would echo through the galaxy, but he also knew it had to be done. In the Council chamber on Terralon, alarms rang as reports from Velnora Prime came, and the delegates shouted over one another, trying to understand what was happening. The Grand Speaker demanded calm, but even it could not hide its fear. "The humans have attacked. They have destroyed Velnora Prime." Someone shouted. "That is impossible," said another. "Our fleets guard that sector." But the images on the screen told the truth. Entire continents were gone. The capital city turned into glass. The Council's greatest symbol of authority erased in minutes, across human space. The news of the strike spread through every ship and station. The soldiers who had once feared the Council now stood taller. They had seen what their fleets could do, and they knew they were no longer the weak newcomers of the galaxy. Admiral Carter sent a message to all units: "The time for negotiation is over. The time for reckoning begins." His words reached every pilot, every technician, every ground soldier, and they answered with silent resolve. The humans moved like a single being, united by one purpose. Meanwhile, Linda Harris sat in her cell on Terralon, unaware of what had just happened. She could hear faint sounds of guards running outside, and she knew something had changed. The lights flickered and the walls shook. She stood up and pressed her ear against the cold metal door. She could hear them talking. "The humans have destroyed Velnora Prime." The council is in chaos. She closed her eyes and smiled softly. Not from joy, but from sorrow and pride, she whispered. Daniel, they heard you. President Laura, King received the confirmation of the strike in the Deep Command Center under Earth. Her advisors waited for her reaction, but she remained silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "Send the message to the council. Make sure every world hears it." Her voice was calm and cold. The transmission went out across every known channel soon. Every alien planet, every station, every ship received the same message. It was only one sentence. "This is the answer to the blood you spilled." The galaxy listened in silence. Panic began to spread across the council territories. Fleets scrambled to protect key worlds, but the humans had already studied them for years. They knew every route, every weakness in the council's communication networks. Human cyber teams, hidden within data systems, activated their code storms. Thousands of satellites went dark, power grids collapsed, and defense shields failed. Entire sectors went blind within hours. The humans had taken control of the stars without needing to occupy them. On one border world called Dranix, the local governor tried to call for reinforcements, but the call never went through. Instead, a human fleet appeared in orbit, its ships black and silent. They did not fire. Instead, they broadcasted a message. In simple words, "Leave your weapons, surrender, and you will live." The aliens on the planet obeyed. They had seen the fate of Velnora Prime, and they knew resistance meant death. The humans did not destroy them, they simply disabled their fleets and left behind a beacon that flashed a single message: "Do not harm another human admiral." Carter continued to lead the fleet deeper into council space. His strategy was simple but effective. He struck hard at symbolic targets, the worlds that had supported the ambassador's execution, and then he disappeared before the council fleets could react. The aliens tried to chase him, but every time they followed, they found nothing. He was always 2 steps ahead, using hidden jump routes that no one else knew on. Terralon, the Grand Speaker, could no longer deny the truth. The council had underestimated the humans. It called an emergency session of all member species to discuss peace. But the hall was half empty. Many ambassadors had already fled, fearing that their worlds would be next. The few that remained demanded an immediate end to hostilities, but no one could agree on what to do. Some wanted to surrender, others wanted to strike back, but no one could find the human fleets. They were everywhere and nowhere at once. Linda Harris was taken from her cell and brought before an interrogation officer. He demanded that she tell them where Earth's command center was, but she only smiled and said, "You think you are still in control? You have no idea what is coming." He struck her, but she did not respond outside the cell. She could hear the sound of sirens. The planet itself was shaking again. The human attack was not just a show of strength. It was a message. Humanity would not be ruled. It would not be silenced. It would never again beg for mercy. They had lost one man, but in his death they had found unity across the stars. Entire species watched in fear as human ships destroyed the most powerful planet in the Council's rule. The message was clear: the age of human submission was over. In the deep space near the nebula of Chorus, Admiral Carter met with the captains of the fleet through a holographic channel. He told them the next phase would not be total war, but controlled destruction. "We will not become what they are," he said. "We will make them remember that peace cannot be built on chains." His officers agreed. They all knew the cost of what they were doing, but none would turn back. On Earth, President King walked through the halls of the command center and looked at the names of the fallen humans who had died in the early conflicts with the Council. She knew the war had only begun, but she also knew humanity would never be the same. They had crossed a line, and there was no return. She stood before the window looking at the stars and said quietly to herself, "May they learn before it is too late." The galaxy now whispered of human vengeance. Stories spread from planet to planet about invisible fleets and worlds turned to ash. Some believed the humans had created new weapons beyond understanding. Others said they were guided by the ghost of their ambassador. Whatever the truth was, everyone agreed that the humans had become something more than just another species. They had become a force. As the fires on Velnora Prime faded into glassy plains and silence returned, Admiral Carter's fleet vanished again into the darkness, their engines silent, their mission unfinished. Every human soldier knew this was only The beginning the Council had drawn first blood and humanity had answered now. The galaxy waited in fear for what would come next. The Galactic Council met in secret under the cold light of Terralon's sky. The great hall that had once echoed with confidence now trembled with fear. The delegates from 100 worlds argued and shouted over one another, blaming and denying. And begging for solutions, the Grand Speaker sat in silence at the center of the chaos. Its silver eyes dim, it had ruled for centuries without challenge, believing that no species would ever dare strike the Council. Yet now, Velnora Prime was gone, and dozens of worlds had fallen quiet. Entire fleets had vanished, and the humans were like shadows striking and disappearing, leaving only destruction behind them. Outside the hall, ships filled the sky over Terralon, their shields glowing faintly as they prepared for what many believed would be the final stand against humanity. The Council had called for all remaining fleets to gather there to protect the capital and defend what was left of their authority. But fear ran deeper than duty half. The commanders no longer trusted the Council. Some had already sent messages to Earth asking for surrender. The Grand Speaker refused to believe that the galaxy's greatest power could lose to one world. It looked at the empty seats of the chamber, where ambassadors once sat, and felt the weight of its arrogance. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Jason Carter's fleet moved in silence. Each ship dark and cold, their engines hidden behind the blackness of deep space. The crew spoke in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the quiet. The Admiral stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic map before him. It showed the entire Council network with Terralon marked in red. His mission was clear. Earth had ordered no conquest, no mass killing, but the Council must be made to fall completely and never rise again. He turned to his officers and said, "We strike at dawn. Synchronize all fleets for jump." His voice was steady. The crew obeyed without hesitation. They knew that what they were about to do would end. The War President Laura King watched from the Earth Command Center as data from the fleet came in every line of code. Every movement followed the plan perfectly. She had not slept in days. The faces of those lost haunted her, but she could not show weakness. She stood before her generals and said, "Today we finish what they began, but we will not become monsters. We will make them remember without becoming them." Her voice carried through the entire command center, and the soldiers listened in silence. They all knew she spoke from the heart. Humanity did not fight for revenge, but for freedom. On Terralon, the night was calm before the storm. The people of the planet looked up at the stars, not knowing that death was already on its way. Many still believed that the Council would protect them. But in the dark sky above their world, invisible shapes moved, thousands of human ships, entering position, orbiting silently like hunters, waiting for the signal deep in the flagship. Admiral Carter stood with his hands behind his back, the countdown ticking on the display beside him. When the clock reached 0, he gave one order: disable their world. It began without a single shot. The human fleet unleashed waves of electromagnetic pulses that spread like invisible storms across the planet within minutes. Every system on Terralon failed. Power vanished. Shields collapsed. Engines died. Cities went dark and silent. The great defense grid that had guarded the capital for centuries flickered and went out. The Council's proud fleet hung helpless in orbit, unable to move, unable to fight. The humans did not fire. They only watched as the once mighty world went quiet. In the Council chamber, the Grand Speaker stared in disbelief. As the lights failed one by one, its voice trembled. "What is happening?" No one answered. The translators went dead. The screens turned black. Panic spread among the delegates. Some screamed, others prayed outside. The sound of explosions echoed as crippled ships fell from the sky, burning through the clouds. The Grand Speaker fell to its knees, realizing the truth. It had mocked the humans. It had executed their ambassador, and now the price had come. Linda Harris sat in her cell, feeling the ground shake, dust falling from the ceiling. She knew what it meant. The humans had come. She stood up and pressed her hand to the wall, whispering, "Thank you, Daniel, thank you." Earth. Moments later, the door opened and 2 human soldiers appeared, their armor dark and marked with the Terran insignia. One of them said softly, "Ambassador Harris, we are here to take you home." She smiled and followed them through the corridors filled with smoke and flickering lights outside the prison. She saw the city burning. Silently under the glow of the dying power lines, Admiral Carter watched the transmission from the surface. His officers reported that the council was completely disabled. No resistance, no power, no command. He nodded, then said, "Open the channel to all frequencies." The screen before him lit up, showing the image of President King from Earth. Her voice was clear and calm when she spoke to the galaxy. "This is President Laura, King of Earth," she said years ago. "We joined your council in hope of peace. We offered friendship and respect. You answered with chains and death. You killed our ambassador, and now you have learned the cost. We do not seek to rule. We only demand that you never again call yourselves our masters from this day forward. Humanity stands alone. Those who come in peace will find peace. Those who come with cruelty will find silence." Her words were heard across thousands of worlds. Some wept, some raged, but all listened. The transmission ended, and the galaxy changed forever. The council was broken. Its fleets disabled, its pride gone. Many of its members surrendered within hours. Others fled to distant worlds, hiding from the humans they had once tried to command. Linda was taken aboard a human shuttle that lifted from the ruined planet. She looked out the window and saw the burning cities fade below her. She remembered Daniel's last words and felt tears in her eyes, but also relief. Humanity had done what he had believed it would stand, not as slaves, but as equals. The shuttle docked with the flagship, and Admiral Carter greeted her with respect. "Welcome home, ma'am," he said. She looked at him and answered, "We lost too much, but we kept our soul." When the fleet withdrew from Terralon, it did not destroy what was left. It left the planet in silence, powerless but alive. The humans wanted the galaxy to see what mercy looked like when born from strength. Behind them, the once mighty capital of the council drifted in darkness, a reminder to all who watched from far back on Earth. The people celebrated not with cheers but with quiet pride. Lights filled the cities as ships returned home carrying soldiers who had fought without hate, only with purpose. President King addressed the world from the Great Hall. Of the Terran Union, she said, "Our mission is done. We will not seek revenge, we will rebuild. We will watch the stars, but we will never bow again." Her speech was simple, and every word reached the heart of every listener. In the following days, messages began to arrive from other species, some asking for peace, some asking for help. Many had feared the council as much as humans had, and now they looked to Earth not as enemies, but as hope. Admiral Carter stood before the great map of the stars and thought of what came next. The war was over, but the scars would last for generations. He whispered to himself, "They will never forget us." And they never should. As Terralon floated quietly in the dark, a single human beacon remained in orbit. Its light, blinking slowly across the void, it sent one message in every language of the galaxy: respect earned, not demanded. And so the humans left, leaving behind silence and a lesson written across the stars, one that would be remembered for 1,000 years. Humanity had shown its strength and its mercy, and in doing so had changed the galaxy forever. Years passed after the fall of the Galactic Council, and the stars grew quiet. The great fleets that once filled the sky of Terralon were now nothing more than wrecks, drifting slowly through the void. The empire that had ruled for centuries was gone, its memory fading like dust in the wind. New powers tried to rise, but none dared to call themselves rulers of the galaxy anymore, for the shadow of humanity still hung above them, like a storm that never truly passed. The message Earth had sent was a simple, and no one forgot it: respect earned, not demanded on Earth. The world had changed. The cities that once built ships for war now built engines for peace. Children who once hid during air raids now played under clear skies. The world had scars, but it stood strong. President Laura King had retired, her hair now gray, her eyes softer. She spent her days walking through the memorial garden that stood where the first orbital defense station had been built. Names of the fallen covered the walls, rows upon rows of heroes who had fought not for conquest but for freedom. Sometimes she would stop and touch the name of Daniel Grant, the ambassador whose death had started everything. She would close her eyes and whisper, "Your dream is alive." Admiral Jason Carter had also left command. He lived in a small house by the ocean. He still woke sometimes at night, hearing the echoes of battle. The hum of engines, the silence after the last order disable their world. He had done what he was told he had, seen the fire from orbit and watched worlds go dark, and yet he had never ordered a single unnecessary death. He told himself that was enough. He would sit by the shore and watch the horizon, thinking of the stars he once traveled in the silence that followed the war. Linda Harris became the first representative of the new Galactic Union, a loose alliance of free worlds. Born from the ruins of the old council, she traveled between planets, speaking to species who once feared humans, and now sought friendship. Her words were calm and honest. "We are not your rulers, we are your neighbors," she would say. And the galaxy listened. Her courage and survival had made her a legend among both humans and aliens. When she returned to Earth for the first time in years, crowds gathered at the spaceport. She smiled and waved, but her eyes carried the memories of the cell where she had once waited for death. Far away on the remains of Terralon, life slowly returned. The planet no longer glowed with the light of power grids and towering cities. Instead, forests grew over broken metal, and rivers flowed through what had once been great halls. A few survivors built small communities. They no longer spoke of the council. They no longer wanted to rule anyone. They lived simple lives under the dim sun. Sometimes they would see human ships pass silently in the sky, never landing, never interfering, only watching like quiet guardians of a new order. In the deep void between stars, the human fleets still patrolled, silent and invisible. They did not conquer. They did not destroy. Their mission was to protect and to remember. In one of those ships, a young officer named David Cole looked at the stars and asked his commander, "Why do we still watch them?" The commander replied, "Because peace is not made once it is guarded every day." The young man nodded and turned back to his station, understanding that the war may have ended, but duty never did. President King's successor stood before the United Terran Assembly years later. His name was Richard Evans, and he spoke with the calm strength that the people had come to expect. He said, "Our place in the galaxy is not to rule by fear, but to lead by example. We have shown our power. Now we must show our wisdom." His speech was broadcast to hundreds of worlds, and many alien leaders listened, knowing that every word from Earth still carried the weight of truth. For even those who once hated humanity now respected it deeply. In the archives of the Galactic Union, there was a room no larger than a classroom. It held one object, the recording of Daniel Grant's last moments captured from the council chamber before his execution. His voice was calm. Even as he faced his end, he said, "Humanity will not forget, but we will also not become what you are." That sentence was now written on the entrance of the Union headquarters. Every visitor, human or alien, passed under it as a reminder of what had begun. The New Age Admiral Carter received a visit one day from a young reporter who wanted to write about the war. The admiral sat with him on the porch as the waves crashed softly nearby. When the reporter asked if he ever regretted what he did, Carter looked at the sea for a long time and said, "I regret that it had to happen, but I do not regret that we stood up." The boy nodded, writing down every word. When he left, Carter stayed outside watching the sunset, and for the first time in years he felt peace. Linda Harris visited the ambassador memorial in Washington years after her service. She laid a small silver coin on the stone engraved with Daniel's name. The coin had once belonged to him, a token of Earth. She had kept it since her rescue. She said softly, "I carried your hope now. The stars do." She looked up and saw the night sky filled with points of light, each one a story, each one a promise that humanity would never be silent again. Across the galaxy, small colonies grew under the banner of cooperation. Human scientists worked with alien engineers to rebuild old worlds. Trade routes opened, cultural exchanges flourished. Music from Earth played in alien marketplaces, and art from distant species filled museums on Earth. What had once been fear became curiosity, and what had once been hate became learning. Still, there were whispers in the dark places of the universe, whispers that feared the humans. Still, some old warlords spoke of revenge, but they never acted. They had seen what happened to the council, and they knew the outcome would be the same. One night, President Evans received a message from an unknown source. It was a short transmission repeating in every frequency. It said, "We remember Terralon, but we do not forget mercy." The signal came from deep space, near the edge of the old council territory. Scientists traced it but found no ship, No station, just a faint human beacon left long ago. It was the same beacon Admiral Carter had placed after the final battle, still sending its soft pulse across the stars, a quiet reminder of who humans were and what they had done. On Earth, children learned about the Galactic War, not as a story of destruction, but as a lesson in balance. Teachers told them that courage is not only in fighting, but in knowing when. To stop that strength means nothing without compassion, and that the stars belong to all who respect them. One little girl raised her hand and asked if humans would ever fight again. The teacher smiled and said, "Only if someone forgets this story." The galaxy healed slowly but surely. Trade and travel returned, alliances grew. Friendships formed, the shadow of the old council faded into memory, and in its place a fragile peace stood, held together by the respect that humanity had earned. President Evans once said, "Peace is not built by fear but by trust, and trust begins when power is used with care." His words echoed across the stars, just as Daniel's once had. Admiral Carter died peacefully by the ocean. His last message to Earth Command was, "Short, protect them all and forgive them." His funeral was attended by soldiers and civilians alike. Linda Harris gave the speech and said, "He never sought glory. He only sought peace." The waves carried his ashes into the sea that night. People across Earth looked up at the stars, knowing that the age of fear had ended for good, and so the story of the war became the story of peace. Humanity had shown the galaxy that strength without cruelty was possible, and that even in the darkest times hope could survive. The stars watched silently as the humans continued their journey. No longer the outsiders, no longer the feared, but the guardians of balance. And when the light of Earth's beacons reached distant worlds, it carried with it a simple truth: never again.